Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a torque wrench repair video for you guys, and I'm going to show you guys how you can fix your torque wrench for less than $2. So this torque wrench is about 15 years old, and it's one of the first torque wrenches I've ever owned. I actually bought it for my 2001 Honda Accord that I used to own. And I've always wanted to toss this thing because it never worked properly and it doesn't even click anymore for the most part. And you know, all the low range torque values don't work anymore on the torque positions. So what I'm going to do is open it up, take it apart, and see if I can reposition the spring and preload it a little bit by putting in a couple washers in between and seeing if I can get the torque wrench back to calibration and at least in a usable state. So before we start, I wanted to show you on this torque wrench. You see how at the bottommost setting, which is 10 foot-pounds, I feel absolutely no spring resistance. And I only feel it when I get to about there, which is about 30, 28 foot-pounds. So that tells me that the spring has compressed and then stayed compressed, because most likely it's because I stored it, compressed at a higher torque rating, and now the spring just naturally is in that position now. So that's thrown off, well, I've lost basically all of my torque at the bottom end, and then at the top end, everything is kind of, out of calibration now because, even if I put it at 50, this thing will click with maybe 10 or less, force. So, that's kind of the issue. All right, so these are the tools that I'm going to be using. Some pliers, Phillips, and a magnet to pull out a pin. And then some supplies you'll need are, some kind of washers. In this case, I'm using a 1/4 inch stainless steel. You'll want the smaller ones that fit the diameter of your spring, or you can use a stainless steel nut. This will work as well if it happens to be the right size for what you need. But what I find is the easiest is to use the 1/4 inch washers because you can get as many as you like and adjust it to your needs. So. And then after that, once we get everything kind of put back together, we're going to be using this luggage, weight. It's a weigher, and we can try to calibrate it and see if the torque wrench is accurate per the readings on the torque wrench. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this apart. So what you're going to need is to disconnect this locking ring. That's part of this adjuster. That's where these pliers come in handy. Okay, and then you can slide this guy all the way up, and you're going to want to take this locking mechanism out now, and it looks like there's a Phillips here that's preventing it from coming out. Just loosen that a little bit, and that should now pull out. Yeah, so it's a good idea to keep these all in the same location so you remember how to put it back together. Now you can take off the adjustment piece. And then, so inside of here, you will notice that right there's a pin, and that pin needs to come out. And one thing I noticed already is that pin, should be under some pressure, which right now it's not. So I probably can just get it out with the magnet without even pressing on it. Yeah, you see. So that should not be the case. It should be, you should have to push it down a little bit to be able to take that out. But that just tells me that that spring in here is just worn out. So now that the pin is out, make sure you don't lose this. So let's see. Pull this guy out, and then this is the spring. So I mean, you're not gonna be able to notice that the spring is shorter because it's still pretty stiff, but I can guarantee you that because it was stored incorrectly by me. I was only probably 19 when I bought this torque wrench, didn't know anything, so that's probably the problem. And if you want, you can go take all this out. And this piece actually is the piece that makes all the noise, the clicking. You can re-grease it, which this one looks pretty okay. I've already re-greased it before when I originally thought it was the grease, so it wasn't the grease. But now we're gonna see if we can adjust the spring. And what we're gonna do is, we can either use a nut, which this one seems to fit pretty perfectly. This is a 13mm nut. Don't know exactly what size it is. I believe it's an M12. And it looks like it works pretty good. Or you can get the 1/4 inch washers like I mentioned. See, and that one fits perfectly. And I might actually just use that. So I'm gonna put this back in, and actually it helps to keep it kind of near the edge here. So that way when you put these guys in, they don't fall. And I have a feeling I'm gonna need at least 3 or maybe more, because like I mentioned earlier, when this guy is in here, so you're supposed to have to push this down to get that locking pin back in. And right now it's, I have to push a little bit, which I don't think that's enough. It should be a lot more than that. So I'm gonna go ahead and put another one in, another washer in, just to be safe. So, well, we'll start with 4, and if it's too much when we start calibrating it, then we'll take one out. Or if it's too little, then we'll add another one in. And if you find these are falling a lot, what you can do is you can put some grease on here, and that'll kind of act like glue and keep it together. But I think I'll be able to get it just like that. Okay. So now you can see that pin, that hole for the pin is nowhere to be found, because I have to push this down quite a bit to get that pin to go in. So, either you're gonna need a friend to help you put it in. What you can also do is get this guy here. This is that locking nut or bolt, and you can thread it back in to give you a little bit more leverage. And now what you can do is you can push it down and try to get that pin back in. And you'll notice that this Phillips screw here actually lines up with that hole, so you'll know exactly where you need this shaft, because it actually rotates freely. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it, because I'm by myself and I'm probably not going to be able to push this down and put this pin in. So I'm going to have to use something more creative, and let me show you what I'm going to use. Alright guys, one thing I forgot to mention is when you guys put this all back together with the washers inside, make sure you test that it makes this clicking noise. There's actually a little cube in here that connects to this other side, and when it gets compressed enough, it makes that click. If you don't have this, make sure you take it apart and put it back together until you do. This is how you know you got it back correctly. So here's what I got. I got my hydraulic jack, a couple of 4x4s, or you can use 2x4s, whatever you got. It doesn't really need to be compressed that much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wedge the torque wrench in between the 4x4 and the workbench I have here, and that will compress it enough so that I can slide the pin in. So let me show you. Okay, so you can see here I've got it wedged up against the 4x4. There's a jack, and it's wedged in between the workbench, and you don't need a lot of force, so that's why you just need to jack it up a little bit, and once it lines up the pin, then you can put the pin in. So let me zoom in for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. So you can see there that it's not quite there yet. Well, I haven't really jacked it up yet, but let me show you. So you can kind of see it. There it is right there. And I'm not really pushing it very hard at all on the jack. Okay. So now you can see the hole lines up, and all you really need to do now is slide the pin back in. That's it. Alright, so now that the pin's back in, take this guy back out. back in. And then these two go together. Make sure you don't lose these two pins in here. You can actually see it on this side. I'm not really sure what they do, but make sure they don't fall out. Okay, so once you get this one started, you can close down this Phillips. It basically prevents this from coming out all the way as you're trying to adjust your locking position. Alright, so let's go ahead and see what our torque readings are now. Alright guys, so here's what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to be measuring the amount of weight it takes to turn the torque wrench at each of these levels. So I got 30, 50, 80, and 95. Those are pretty common, torque values for a lot of fasteners. And what I'm going to be using is basically a scale. It weighs things like packages, fish, what have you, luggage. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this torque wrench here, and I've already got it clamped in the vise with the head inside so it can't go anywhere. And we're just going to pull this guy, and when it clicks, we're going to read what the value is on this weigher. And then we'll record them all down on this paper. And then what we're going to do is, since the torque wrench is actually 16.5 inches from the center of the head to the end where I'm going to be hooking up the scale to, we need to convert it back to 1 foot. So what you'll do is you'll multiply whatever you get by 16.5 and then divide it by 12, and then that will be your true foot-pound torque. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to set the torque wrench to 30 first. So let's see. Alright, lock it in. And let's see. Let me see if I can get you guys in the shot so you guys can actually see the reading. Alright, so zero it out. Put it in here. Like I mentioned, this is 16.5 inches. If you really wanted to do like if you wanted this to say 30 when you pulled on it, you can actually tie a rope here at 12 inches, and you can pull from here. And it's going to take a little bit more. Well, it should take exactly 30 if your torque wrench is calibrated properly. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the 16.5 because it actually has a hole in here where I can hook this this guy in. Alright, let's go with the first test and see what we get. So you can see it's applying 8 pounds of pressure. It's not clicking yet, which is good. So it should be less than 30. Okay, so that's about 20. Let's try that again. Okay, 21. And I'll do 3 and then just get the average. I'm going to call that what it is. Okay, 21. So 20, 21, and 21. Alright, let's move up to 50. Now when you're doing the calibration, you want to test a couple of different points because the spring, now that it's kind of preloaded, and springs are constant. So if you test, an upper end and a lower end, everything in between should fall in line, but you never know. So, all right, set to 50 now. Zero this back out. Let's see how much weight we have to apply to get this to click. All right, 33. 34. 34. So 33, 34, 34. One thing to keep in mind is you want to pull 90 degrees from this guy You don't want to introduce, error when you're pulling this guide. Okay, so I'm going to move it up to 80 now and test that out. And I'm not quite sure what this torque wrench is actually rated for, the range, but on this adjustment knob it goes all the way up to 150 and down to 10. So alright, I've got the torque wrench set to 80 foot-pounds now, and we're gonna see how much weight it takes to get this guy to click. Alright. Couldn't see any of that, but I'll get the numbers off the footage. Set it up to 95 now. Alright. Reset. There we go. Alright, we'll grab the numbers off the camera and I'll get right back to you guys. Alright guys, here are the results. So you can see I took the average at each of the different measurements, and you can see at the bottom I converted it back to foot-pounds with the the appropriate multiplier, since the torque wrench is too long, or it's longer than 12 inches. And you can see they're all coming in a little bit less than what they should be coming in at. So you can see we got 28 for 30, which is low, 46 for 50, 73 for 80, and this might be because I couldn't really catch the appropriate weight on the camera. And then here we got 84 for 95. So these upper ones are really off. These lower ones are not too bad, but they're still off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another washer and see if my tests prove to be a little bit better. And if it is, then great. If not, then I will just go back to what I have now, which is 4 washers. So I'm going to switch to 5 washers. I'll share the results with you guys. I won't show you guys how to change it and add new washers. It's the same process. And then I'll let you guys know what I get when I change it to 5. Alright guys, here's the results with the 5 washers. You can see all the numbers went up quite a bit, and you'll notice that now I am over torquing on every single setting. So I've got 37 for the 30 setting, 56 for the 50, 84 for the 80, and 99 for the 95. So I think I'm going to take it back to 4 washers and then call it good. So I wanted to show you how thick each of these washers are. So you can see one of them is about 1.12 millimeters, and I've got 5 on now, but originally I had 4. So you can see every single one that adds a millimeter, kind of adds about 5 foot-pounds. So I mean, if I really wanted to, I can find something that's 5 millimeters, because if I add one more, it's going to be about 5.7. So if I go halfway, it's about 5.1. So if I could find something that's 5.1, I probably would be right on the money for my torque. Alright, so I found 4 washers that are about 5.08 millimeters that I'm going to try. They kind of have imperfections in them, and they're kind of thicker than some of the other ones. So I'm going to try this guy out and see what happens. Alright guys, so here are all the results for the tests that we performed. You can see in the top left This is the first test, and this is with 4 washers. I actually didn't measure the washers, but I'm just going to assume that it's about 4.58 millimeters or something around there. And you can see that most of the torque ratings conversions that we have are lower than the test amounts. So here you can see it's about 1 foot-pound off, 3, 6, 10. And I've included the percentage down here so that you guys can kind of see, how far off we are. And then if you look to the right here, this is the second test that we did with 5 washers. And if you recall from the video, those torque readings were way over. And so you can see here we're at 7 foot-pounds too much, 6, 4, and 4. So, and here are the percentages. So this one's like wildly off, the 30 foot-pounds. And these were not going to be acceptable. And if you look at it, this is actually closer because we're only 5 to 10% off. Over here we're 4 to 23% off. So I went and got the middle of these two, which is about 5.1, and I found 4 washers that actually fit 5.1 millimeters. So I put that in there and reran the test, and you can see here we got fairly close to the torque handle position. And so at 30 foot-pounds we're only off by about 1 foot-pound. At 50 we're off about 2 foot-pounds. At 80 we're off about 3, and then at 95 we're reading about 90. And you can see here the percentages are fairly reasonable. We're at 3 to 5% off of our torque rating. And if you actually look at a lot of the torque wrenches that are on sale today, a lot of them are probably within 4% accurate, and they'll actually put that on their disclaimer when you buy the torque wrench. And so I would probably call this a success, and I think it's close enough that I'm not going to worry too much. I mean, if you're torquing something down to 95 and you put it at 90, it's not the end of the world. And I'll just keep in mind that my torque wrench is actually reading less than what I'm setting it to, and I can probably go up a notch. One last thing I want to mention with torque wrenches is that torque ratings and torque specs, those aren't the end of the world. I mean, if you worked on cars long enough, you kind of get a sense for what torque, how much to torque down your bolts. If you've got a 14 millimeter fastener, obviously don't torque it to 80 foot-pounds. That's probably too much. The max probably is like 60 for those. If you got a 10 millimeter head, those are probably going to be 30 foot-pounds at most. And I'll be honest with you, on anything less than 40 or maybe less than 50, I'm most likely going to just hand torque it by feel and not even bring out the torque wrench because it's probably not needed. Another thing on that topic is, if you're working on something very delicate, let's say you're working on a head, you're putting a new head in for the engine and it needs to be precisely 60 foot-pounds, then you're probably going to want to use a torque wrench for that application, because you want to make sure when you put that head on top of the block that everything is evenly distributed and that it goes on correctly. But if you're working on like suspension parts or things like that, most likely you're just going to tighten it up until you can't tighten it no more, and use your brain, not your muscle, and you should be okay. If you actually go talk to some of the mechanics, they will actually tell you that they actually don't use a torque wrench ever, because one, it takes too much time, and they've done it so many times that they can do it by feel. And really the only things they use torque wrenches on are things that are the things that I mentioned earlier, timing belt jobs, head gasket jobs, things that kind of require it, because they don't, they're already in so far, they don't want to mess it up just because they've over tightened a certain bolt and cause the the head to be uneven. Alright guys, so that about wraps up the video, and hopefully that saves your guys' torque wrench. We only spent 4 washers on this entire project, so very simple, easy repair. You know, if anybody thinks this repair isn't valid, let me know in the comments, because I have no idea. You know, that's why I did the calibration and the test, to confirm the results. You know, everything seems to line up for me, so if this helps you, then great. If not, you know, you can always buy a new torque wrench. I think these things run about $34.95, you know, on Amazon, and they should be pre-calibrated for you. So, you know, if you want to go that route, that's okay. But, you know, for 4 washers and a little bit of time, you know, because you're gonna have to guess how many washers you need to kind of fix that spring rate, you know, it's not too bad.